The door to Unit 38 rolled up with a reluctant shriek, releasing not the expected mustiness of abandonment, but the gentler breath of old paper and cedar wood, the scent of kept promises. Rebecca Miller stood motionless, one hand resting on her swollen belly, the other gripping the padlock key so tightly her knuckles had blanched. She had expected chaos, toppling boxes, forgotten furniture, perhaps a broken vacuum cleaner listing in some corner. Instead, there was order, perfect, deliberate order. Boxes stacked in tidy columns, each side meticulously labeled in a narrow, precise hand. Estate linens, kitchen, glass, documents, personal. A steamer trunk sat squarely at the back, its brass fittings catching the thin light like old stars. "My goodness," Martha whispered beside her, the toes of her sensible shoes tapping the concrete as she took a cautious step forward. Someone cared deeply about these things. Rebecca nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. At 7 months pregnant, in a town where she now knew almost no one, standing before this pristinely organized storage unit felt like finding unexpected kindness in a world that had lately shown her very little. She took in the neatness, the careful labels, the way a cotton sheet had been tucked over a small maple bureau to protect it from dust. This had been packed by someone who believed they would return. They had not come to this auction for adventure. They had come because Rebecca's savings were gone, her future uncertain, and because hope, when it could be afforded at all these days, arrived in small, awkward packages. Just a year earlier, she'd been a librarian with a master's in history, engaged to be married, and expecting her first child. Then Thomas had looked at her across their kitchen table one evening and said, "I can't do this. I'm not ready to be someone's father." He was gone before the weekend. 6 months later, a too charming investment advisor had persuaded Rebecca to place her modest inheritance from her mother into a guaranteed growth fund. The checks had cleared until they didn't. The phone answered until it stopped. The office existed until it vanished overnight. The police took statements and gave her a case number. The bank managers practiced sympathy in well-modulated tones. Rebecca learned at 34 how to fold grief into silence. She learned which groceries stretch furthest on a part-time librarian's salary. She learned how to smile at neighbors without letting the smile reach her eyes. She rented a small apartment from Martha, a retired history teacher who had once taught Rebecca's mother, and practiced the discipline of not looking backward. The auction had been Martha's idea, though she pretended otherwise. She clipped a notice from the local Oak Ridge Gazette, public lien sale, contents of delinquent storage units, and left it on Rebecca's breakfast plate beneath her prenatal vitamins. Rebecca had read the words 3 times, not because the print was small, but because the sentence at the bottom pulled at some forgotten thread of possibility inside her. You never know what treasures you might find. So they had gone, standing at the back of a cluster of regulars in baseball caps and cargo vests, people who knew how to appraise the value of forgotten things at a glance. The auctioneer had walked them down the lanes, metal doors rolling upward to reveal the abandoned debris of interrupted lives. Most units were what Rebecca expected: couches with broken arms, refrigerators with lingering odors, cardboard boxes buckled by old rain. But number 38 had labels. It had corners aligned with mathematical precision. It had the quiet dignity of intention. While the auction regulars had shifted impatiently, barely glancing inside, Rebecca had felt a strange kinship with whoever had packed this room with such care. When the bidding stalled at $65, she raised her hand. The auctioneer's gaze had traveled to the back, quick calculation behind a practiced smile. The numbers moved once more, then stopped. A last call, a hammer's tap, and the unit, this stubbornly orderly room, belonged to her for $70. "Where do we start?" Martha asked, adjusting her glasses as she surveyed their new possession. Rebecca smiled, the first genuine smile in weeks. "We start with respect." She pulled a small clamp lamp from her canvas tote bag and plugged it into the corridor outlet. We document everything carefully. Whoever packed this deserves that much. Martha nodded, understanding immediately. Like archaeologists, not treasure hunters. Exactly. Rebecca placed a hand on her belly as the baby shifted. Let's begin with that box labeled linens. Something tells me it's the least personal. The first lid surrendered with a soft protest of packing tape. And inside were linens folded with military precision, the kind belonging to people who had learned by watching someone who had learned by watching someone before them. Lace-trimmed pillowcases, monogrammed hand towels, a tablecloth pressed so flat it might have been ironed yesterday. Not particularly valuable in a pawn shop sense, but cherished once, and they handled each piece with the gentle respect that knowledge demands. The second box held glassware, 8 small tumblers of thick green depression glass, then 4 wider bowls with a faint blue ring around the rim. Martha lifted one toward the lamp. The tiny imperfections, air bubbles trapped in glass, slight waviness, scattered light like memories do when they move past pain. Beautiful, Martha murmured. My grandmother had pieces just like these. They sorted items into careful piles, those that might sell at the weekend market, those too personal to resell, and a smaller collection of things that spoke to them in ways neither woman could quite articulate. The third box was filled with letters, their envelopes stacked by size, tied with a ribbon darkened by the oils of many hands. Rebecca loosened one bundle and unfolded a single page, reading just a few lines before stopping abruptly. My dearest Margaret, I carry your heart with me always, though the road ahead remains uncertain. Her voice faltered. This feels too private. Martha nodded, understanding without words. Rebecca carefully retied the ribbon and returned the letters to their box. Love letters, she thought. When was the last time anyone had written those to her? The baby shifted again, more insistently this time. Rebecca pressed a hand to her side, feeling the small foot or elbow pushing outward. I know, little one, she whispered. I'm curious too. Time passed without its usual weight. The small lamp created a circle of warm light in which they worked, cataloging history piece by piece. Martha's arthritis complained, but her hands remembered the satisfaction of useful labor. Rebecca found herself humming softly, an unconscious melody her mother had once sung while gardening. For a few hours, the knot of anxiety that had lived between her shoulder blades loosened just enough to allow something like contentment. Beneath a stack of crocheted afghans, Martha discovered a wooden box no larger than a bread tin. Its brass corners were dented from some long-ago impact, its small keyhole clouded with age. It had weight, not the hollow weight of empty keepsakes, but the definite gravity of purpose. Rebecca, Martha called softly, come see. Rebecca set aside the quilt she'd been folding and joined Martha at the small maple bureau where she'd placed the box. There was something about its worn elegance that quieted the room. Martha wiped its surface gently with a cloth, revealing warm cherry wood beneath years of dust. No key, Rebecca observed, examining the tarnished lock. Martha's smile held a glint of mischief. When I was teaching, the janitor showed me a trick for old cabinet locks. From her purse, she produced a small flathead screwdriver. Sometimes all it takes is a little patience and the right tool. The lock resisted briefly, then surrendered with a soft click. Rebecca held her breath as Martha lifted the lid. Inside lay a parcel wrapped in waxed paper and tied with cotton string, yellowed with age. Martha's fingers, knobbed with arthritis but still deft, worked the knot loose. As the paper fell open, a soft metallic music filled the storage unit. The gentle collision of old coins shifting against one another. They weren't shiny or new. Time had laid a soft patina over their surfaces. But the markings remained clear. A profile in relief, a shield, the ghostly remnants of Latin inscriptions around the edge. Spanish silver, Rebecca whispered, her librarian's knowledge surfacing. Colonial era, I think. She lifted one coin carefully, tilting it to catch the light. 1789. These crossed oceans in merchants' pockets, then mountains on mule trains. Her voice trailed off as she noticed something else beneath the coins. A flat packet of paper lay at the bottom of the box, its outer sheet browned and brittle where the folds had cracked. With extreme care, she slid it free, using the flat of her hand to avoid damaging the fragile edges. The paper was thicker than modern stock, with a torn watermark just visible in the lamplight. Ink had faded to the soft brown of oversteeped tea. Upon it, a firm hand had drawn the winding course of a river between two hills. Small marks indicated distances, and there, slightly off-center, was a cross, placed with deliberate purpose. "It's a map," Martha breathed, "like something from a storybook." But Rebecca recognized it as something more. Her academic training in historical documents made her heart race. "This isn't just any map. Look at the paper quality, the ink formula. This could be from the late 1700s. She pointed to faint initials in the corner. BMH. Someone marked this place for a reason. Just then, a movement outside the storage unit caught her eye. Through the gap in the partially lowered door, she glimpsed a man standing beside a dark sedan, watching them through binoculars. When he realized she'd spotted him, he quickly lowered the glasses and slid into his car. "Martha," Rebecca said quietly, "I think someone's watching us." Martha followed her gaze just in time to see the sedan pulling away. "Probably just another auction hunter curious about what we found," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Rebecca felt the baby kick sharply, as if registering her sudden anxiety. She placed a protective hand over her belly. "Let's pack up for today. I think we found more than enough to think about." Richard Maxwell's coin shop sat between a barber and a shuttered travel agency on Main Street, its window display a calculated mythology. Trays of wheat pennies, a poster of Mercury dimes, and a framed photograph of Maxwell shaking hands with a local mayor from 3 administrations ago. Inside, glass cases gleamed under harsh fluorescent lighting, their contents arranged with mathematical precision. The man himself stood behind the counter, a striped tie clipped firmly to his shirt, his eyes moving over Rebecca with the appraising gaze of someone accustomed to calculating value at a glance. "Just one?" he asked when she placed a single Spanish silver coin on the velvet pad. "For now," Rebecca answered. "I'd like an informal assessment, if you don't mind." Maxwell examined the edge with a jeweler's loupe, tapped the face lightly with his fingernail, and weighed it on a small digital scale. He spoke in the flat cadence of someone reciting weather statistics. "Common colonial issue, modest silver content, unfortunate rim damage." He slid a notepad across the glass with a number written in precise digits. $80. Rebecca felt her pulse quicken. Martha had researched similar coins online the previous evening. They typically sold for $300, $500, depending on condition. The lowball offer confirmed her suspicions that the collection might be worth much more than it appeared. "I see," she said, keeping her voice neutral. "And would you have any interest in the other 11 coins? Or perhaps in the map that accompanied them?" Maxwell's expression changed subtly, a tightening around the eyes, a slight forward lean of his torso. "Map?" The word hung in the air between them, charged with unexpected interest. "Yes, an old parchment showing a river bend. Quite fragile. It has the initials BMH in the corner." The bell over the door chimed, interrupting their conversation. An elegant older woman in a tweed jacket entered, carrying a leather portfolio. She surveyed the scene with the calm assessment of a physician reading vital signs. "I couldn't help overhearing," she said, approaching the counter. I'm Eleanor Hughes from the Oak Ridge Historical Society. If you're interested in proper authentication of historical documents, I'd be happy to arrange an evaluation at our museum. Maxwell's smile cooled noticeably. Ms. Miller and I were in the middle of a private transaction. Of course, Eleanor replied smoothly. I simply wanted to offer resources. Historical artifacts often have significance beyond their market value. She handed Rebecca a business card. Our museum specializes in local history, particularly related to the Silver Trail trading route. Rebecca accepted the card, noting the way Maxwell's jaw tightened at the mention of the Silver Trail. Thank you, she said, carefully retrieving her coin from the velvet pad. I'll consider both options. Outside on the sidewalk, Rebecca exhaled slowly, one hand pressed against her lower back, where a dull ache had settled. Eleanor Hughes emerged from the shop moments later. Mr. Maxwell has quite a reputation in collecting circles, Eleanor said, falling into step beside Rebecca. Not all of it flattering. I gathered that from his offer, Rebecca replied. You mentioned the Silver Trail? That's what I think this map might show. Eleanor's eyes brightened with genuine interest. Would you consider bringing it to the museum? I promise a fair assessment with no pressure to sell or donate. Rebecca hesitated, her protective instincts heightened by pregnancy and recent disappointments. Why are you helping me? Because history belongs to all of us, Eleanor said simply. And because I knew someone once who spent his life documenting the Silver Trail. Your map might complete a puzzle many have tried to solve. Who was that person? Benjamin Maxwell Harrison, a brilliant local historian who died in 1967. Eleanor watched Rebecca's face carefully. Does that name mean anything to you? Rebecca shook her head. Should it? Perhaps not, but those initials on your map, BMH, they could very well be his. The baby kicked again, a gentle pressure against Rebecca's ribs. She placed her hand over the spot, a gesture that had become automatic in recent months. I'll bring the map tomorrow, she decided, but just to look, not to sell. That's all I ask, Eleanor smiled, her eyes crinkling at the corners. History deserves patience. The Oak Ridge Historical Society Museum occupied a Victorian mansion on a quiet street lined with ancient oak trees. Its rooms smelled of furniture polish and old books, a scent that had always comforted Rebecca. Eleanor met her at the entrance, elegantly dressed in charcoal slacks and a blue cashmere sweater that matched her eyes. Thank you for coming, she said, leading Rebecca past glass cases filled with arrowheads and pioneer tools. I've prepared a workspace in our archival room where we can examine the map safely. In a small room lined with document cabinets, a table had been set up with white cotton gloves, a magnifying glass, and a specialized light. Rebecca carefully removed the map from its archival sleeve, where she had placed it the night before. Extraordinary, Eleanor whispered as the parchment was revealed. The preservation quality is remarkable for its age. She donned gloves and gently positioned the map under the light, examining it with the focus of someone accustomed to reading history's faintest whispers. The ink is iron gall, consistent with late 18th century documents. The watermark, she tilted the paper, is from a paper mill that operated in Philadelphia until 1805. Rebecca watched, fascinated by Eleanor's expertise. What about the river it shows? Almost certainly Silver Creek, which was once called Rio de Plata by Spanish traders. This bend here, she pointed to a curve in the drawn waterway, matches the topography about 25 miles northeast of town. Her finger moved to the cross. And this mark is precisely where local legend says a cache of Spanish trade goods was hidden during a conflict with native tribes. So it's a treasure map? Rebecca asked, unable to keep a note of skepticism from her voice. Eleanor smiled. In a sense, though treasure meant different things to different people. The historical value alone is significant. Benjamin Harrison spent decades trying to document the exact route of the Silver Trail. She hesitated. "May I show you something?" From a folder, she withdrew a black and white photograph. It showed a lean man with intelligent eyes and a serious expression, standing beside a young woman with dark hair pulled back from her face. They were examining what appeared to be a map spread across a desk. "This is Benjamin Harrison in 1965 with one of his research assistants." Eleanor watched Rebecca's face carefully. Her name was Margaret. Rebecca's breath caught. Margaret, her mother's name. The young woman in the photograph did bear a striking resemblance to the few pictures Rebecca had of her mother as a college student. But surely that was coincidence. Her mother had never mentioned working with a local historian. I don't understand," Rebecca stammered. "Are you suggesting my mother knew Mr. Harrison?" Eleanor's expression softened. "Your mother was Margaret Miller?" Rebecca nodded, her hand instinctively moving to her belly as the baby shifted restlessly. Benjamin had several research assistants during his career, most of them students from the local college. Margaret was special, though. She had an intuitive understanding of historical patterns, much like Benjamin himself. Eleanor's voice grew gentle. He mentioned her often in his journals, always with respect and affection. Rebecca's mind raced. Her mother had died 5 years ago after a brief battle with cancer, taking many of her stories with her. She had mentioned studying history in college, but never anything about working with a renowned local historian. "There's more," Eleanor said, retrieving another document. "This is the last entry in Benjamin's research journal, dated 2 weeks before his death." Rebecca read the faded handwriting. "BMH for MM. Secrets best kept for the next generation. When the time comes, Silver Creek's second bend will reveal what truly matters." "BMH for MM," Rebecca whispered. "Benjamin Maxwell Harrison for Margaret Miller." Eleanor nodded. "I believe Benjamin entrusted something important to your mother, perhaps this very map and coins. The storage unit you purchased. Do you know how long its contents had been there?" The manager said the payments were made automatically from a trust account for nearly 50 years. When the trust dissolved recently, the unit went to auction. 50 years, Eleanor mused, since 1967, the year Benjamin died. Rebecca felt a chill despite the room's warmth. "Are you saying my mother knew about this all along? Why wouldn't she have told me?" "Perhaps she was waiting for the right time," Eleanor suggested gently. "Or perhaps she intended to, but life, as it often does, had other plans." Before Rebecca could respond, her phone vibrated with a text message from Martha. "Come home immediately. Someone broke into your apartment. Nothing taken, but everything searched. Called police." Rebecca's hand trembled as she showed the message to Eleanor. "This is concerning," Eleanor said, her voice tightening. "Benjamin's research attracted unwanted attention over the years. Richard Maxwell, the man from the coin shop, is Benjamin's adopted son, though he presents himself as a nephew. He's been trying to acquire his father's scattered research for decades. Why would he break into my apartment? Because the map you found might be the missing piece that completes Benjamin's life work." Eleanor carefully returned the map to its protective sleeve. "You should stay somewhere else tonight. Somewhere Richard wouldn't know about." As they left the museum, Rebecca noticed a dark sedan parked across the street, the same one she had glimpsed at the storage facility. The man inside was watching them. "Eleanor," she whispered, "I think we're being followed." Eleanor followed her gaze and frowned. "That's not Richard. That's Thomas Walker. He was Benjamin's research partner in later years." She squared her shoulders. "Wait here." To Rebecca's astonishment, Eleanor marched directly toward the car. The man Thomas rolled down his window, and they engaged in what appeared to be an intense conversation. After a few minutes, Eleanor returned. "Thomas has been watching you since the auction," she explained. Not to frighten you, but to protect you. He promised Benjamin he would safeguard his research from Richard. He wants to meet with us properly. Can we trust him?" Eleanor's smile was tinged with sadness. "In this matter? Absolutely. Thomas loved Benjamin like a father." Martha's cozy bungalow smelled of cinnamon and coffee when Rebecca arrived. The older woman embraced her tightly, maternal concern evident in every line of her face. "The police were useless," she reported. "Said there was no sign of forced entry and nothing stolen." Rebecca sank into an armchair, suddenly exhausted. "The map and coins are safe. I had them with me." Martha nodded with approval. "Smart girl. Now tell me everything that happened at the museum." As Rebecca recounted her conversation with Eleanor, Martha's expression grew increasingly troubled. When Rebecca mentioned her mother's possible connection to Benjamin Harrison, Martha removed her glasses and pinched the bridge of her nose. "I should have made the connection sooner," she sighed. "Your mother was one of my brightest history students. She mentioned working with a local researcher during college, but I never knew it was Harrison." "Why wouldn't she have told me about any of this?" Rebecca asked, the hurt evident in her voice. Martha reached over and patted her hand. "Margaret always played her cards close to the chest, even as a young woman. She had her reasons, I'm sure." Later that evening, Eleanor arrived with Thomas Walker, a weathered man in his 70s with kind eyes and calloused hands. He removed his hat upon entering, revealing a full head of silver hair, and approached Rebecca with respectful caution. "Ms. Miller," he said, his voice deep and gentle, "I apologize for alarming you, but when I saw you at the auction, with your mother's eyes and carrying a child of your own, it seemed history was coming full circle." "You knew my mother?" Thomas nodded. "I was there when Benjamin gave her those coins and that map for safekeeping. It was 2 days before he died." Eleanor interrupted gently. "Thomas, perhaps we should start from the beginning." Over cups of tea that grew cold as the story unfolded, Thomas explained how Benjamin Harrison had spent his life documenting the Silver Trail, not just as a historical exercise, but because he believed it held secrets about the early settlement of the region that had been deliberately obscured. The official histories claim the Spanish never established a permanent trading post this far north, Thomas explained. Benjamin found evidence proving otherwise. He discovered documents suggesting a small settlement existed near the second bend of Silver Creek, a place where Spanish traders and local tribes established a peaceful exchange that lasted nearly a decade. "Why would that be kept secret?" Rebecca asked. "Because it contradicted the narrative that justified seizing tribal lands," Eleanor explained. "If there had been established peaceful trade, the entire legal basis for the land treaties would have been questionable." Thomas continued, "Benjamin was close to publishing his findings when he became ill. He knew certain parties would try to discredit or destroy his research, so he separated his evidence into several caches and entrusted them to people he believed would keep them safe. And one of those people was my mother," Rebecca concluded. Thomas nodded. "Margaret was special to Benjamin. She understood the importance of truth, even uncomfortable truth. Richard, Benjamin's adopted son, never shared his father's ethical concerns," Eleanor added. "He was more interested in the possibility of Spanish artifacts that might be valuable." "The night after Benjamin's funeral, his study was broken into," Thomas said. "Many papers were stolen. He had anticipated this. Thankfully." Rebecca's hand moved to her belly, where the baby had begun an energetic series of movements. "So what does this map actually lead to?" Thomas and Eleanor exchanged glances. "We believe it marks the location of Benjamin's most significant evidence," Eleanor said, "possibly Spanish colonial documents that would prove the existence of the settlement." "And Richard wants them for their monetary value," Rebecca guessed. "Precisely," Thomas confirmed, "which is why we need to find them first, to preserve their historical integrity." Martha, who had been listening quietly, suddenly snapped her fingers. "Rebecca, Remember that old cedar chest in your mother's attic? The one you never could find the key for? Maybe there's something there that could help. Rebecca's eyes widened. It's in storage now. With the rest of Mom's things I couldn't fit in the apartment. Then that's where we'll start looking tomorrow, Eleanor decided. For tonight, you should both stay here where it's safe. As the others discussed logistics, Rebecca slipped away to Martha's guest room. She felt overwhelmed by revelations about her mother, by the unexpected connections to a past she'd never known existed. Sitting on the edge of the bed, she removed a worn photograph from her wallet, her mother smiling with the quiet confidence that had defined her, taken just months before her diagnosis. "What were you keeping from me, Mom?" she whispered. "And why didn't you tell me?" The baby kicked again, a strong, deliberate movement beneath her ribs. Rebecca smiled despite her confusion. "Yes, I know. You're curious too. Your grandmother was quite the mystery, it seems." Outside, darkness had settled over Martha's garden. Through the window, Rebecca could see Thomas standing guard on the porch, his silhouette a reassuring presence against the night. For the first time in months, she felt something beyond anxiety and grief, a spark of curiosity, of purpose. Whatever secrets her mother and Benjamin Harrison had protected, she was determined to uncover them, not just for history's sake, but for the child growing within her, a child who deserved to know their heritage. Rebecca placed her hand over her belly and made a silent promise. "We'll find the truth, little one, together." The cedar chest yielded its secrets reluctantly. Hidden beneath a false bottom, wrapped in her mother's wedding veil, Rebecca found a small leather journal and a tarnished key with an ornate handle. "It's Margaret's handwriting," Martha confirmed, peering over Rebecca's shoulder as she opened the journal with trembling fingers. The earliest entry was dated September 1965. "Professor Wilson recommended me for a research position with Benjamin Harrison, the local historian everyone whispers about. They say he's brilliant but difficult. Today I learned both assessments are correct. He's investigating what he calls historical erasure along the Silver Trail. His theories are controversial but compelling. I've agreed to help catalog Spanish colonial artifacts he's discovered." Rebecca read several entries aloud, tracing her mother's intellectual journey from skeptical student to passionate advocate for Harrison's work. The journal revealed a deep friendship between the young woman and the older historian, united by their commitment to historical truth. Then came an entry that made Rebecca's breath catch. January 18, 1967. "Benjamin's health is deteriorating rapidly. Today he entrusted me with his most precious findings, Spanish silver coins and a map he believes will lead to documents proving the settlement existed. Keep them safe," he told me. "The truth has patience. It will wait for the right time, the right person. I've arranged for a storage unit under a trust account. No one will look for history's secrets in such an ordinary place." The final entry was dated February 3, 1967. "Benjamin passed away yesterday. Thomas is devastated. I've secured everything as promised." Richard was asking questions at the funeral. Pointed, suspicious questions. "I won't risk staying in Oak Ridge any longer. The truth will wait," as Benjamin said. "Perhaps one day my own children will complete what we started." "She knew," Rebecca whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "She was protecting this legacy all along." Eleanor examined the key Rebecca had found. "This looks like it might fit a lockbox or small safe. Any idea what it might open?" Rebecca shook her head. "The storage unit was the only thing I knew about." "The map," Thomas suggested suddenly. "The X marks a specific spot at Silver Creek's second bend. Perhaps whatever is hidden there requires this key." By mid-afternoon, their small group had assembled at Silver Creek. The January air was crisp, the winter sun casting long shadows across the frozen ground. Thomas led the way, consulting both the ancient map and a modern topographical survey. "Here," he announced finally, stopping at a curve in the creek where two large boulders created a natural marker. This matches the map exactly. Rebecca felt a strange sensation as she stood at the spot marked with an X on the parchment. The baby moved with unusual vigor, as though responding to some invisible energy. She placed her hand on her belly, whispering, "I feel it too." "Look," Martha called, pointing to a flat stone partially embedded in the ground. Carved into its surface were the initials, MMM, BMMH. With Thomas's help, they carefully shifted the stone, revealing a small hollow beneath. Inside was a metal box, weathered but intact. Rebecca's hands shook as she inserted the ornate key into its lock. It turned with surprising ease. Inside lay a leather-bound journal, several yellow documents with faded Spanish script, and a sealed envelope addressed simply, "For Margaret and the generation that follows." Rebecca opened the envelope with care. Inside was a letter written in the same steady hand she had come to recognize as Benjamin Harrison's. "My dear Margaret, if you are reading this, then the time has come for truth to emerge from shadow. The documents enclosed prove without doubt the existence of the Plata del Norte settlement, a place where different cultures found common ground through trade and mutual respect. These papers may seem like mere historical curiosities, but they represent something profound, evidence that our accepted narratives are often convenient fictions that serve those in power. The truth matters, Margaret. It always matters. I leave this legacy in your capable hands, trusting you will know when and how to bring it to light. Perhaps it will be you. Perhaps it will be your children. History has patience that we mortals can only aspire to. With deepest affection and respect, Benjamin Maxwell Harrison. P.S. There is one more secret waiting at my old cabin. The deed is in the museum archives, legally transferred to your name, though you never knew. When you are ready, the final piece will make itself known." Rebecca read the letter twice, her voice growing stronger with each word. When she finished, silence settled over the group, broken only by the gentle gurgle of the creek and the distant call of a winter bird. "He knew," Eleanor said finally. "Benjamin knew your mother would protect his legacy and that someday you would continue the work." Thomas knelt beside the hollow, carefully gathering the documents. "These will need proper preservation. They're invaluable historical evidence." As they prepared to leave, Rebecca noticed a dark sedan parked on the access road. Richard Maxwell emerged, his expression thunderous. "That's private property," he shouted, striding toward them. "And those documents belong to the Harrison estate. To me." Thomas stepped forward protectively. "The Harrison estate was settled decades ago, Richard. You have no claim here." "I'm his son." Richard's face flushed with anger. "Those are my birthright." "Adopted son," Eleanor corrected calmly, "and Benjamin made his wishes clear in his will. These documents were entrusted to Margaret Miller and her heirs." Richard's gaze shifted to Rebecca, narrowing with sudden calculation. "Miller, you're Margaret's daughter." A cold smile spread across his face. "Did she ever tell you the whole truth about her relationship with my father? About why he trusted her so completely?" Before he could continue, Rebecca gasped sharply, doubling over as a sudden pain gripped her abdomen. "Something's wrong," she managed, panic edging her voice. Martha was at her side instantly, supporting her weight. "The baby?" "Hospital," Thomas said decisively, all other concerns forgotten. "Now." In the chaos that followed, Richard retreated, his threats momentarily suspended by the more immediate crisis. Eleanor helped Martha guide Rebecca to Thomas's truck while he secured the discovered artifacts. The contractions came in unpredictable waves as they raced toward Oak Ridge Memorial Hospital. Too early, Rebecca thought desperately. 7 months was too early. In the swirl of pain and fear, she found herself gripping Martha's hand and whispering her mother's name like a prayer. Rebecca awoke to the gentle beeping of monitors and the soft weight of a hospital blanket. Martha dozed in a chair beside the bed, her glasses perched precariously on the end of her nose. "The baby?" Rebecca whispered, her throat dry. Martha startled awake, immediately reaching for Rebecca's hand. "She's perfect, sweetheart. Small but fighting, just like her mother." "She? A beautiful little girl. They have her in the NICU as a precaution, but the doctor says her lungs are remarkably developed for 32 weeks. Tears of relief flowed freely down Rebecca's cheeks. "Can I see her?" "Soon," Martha promised. "Eleanor and Thomas are keeping watch outside. They've hardly left since bringing you in yesterday." "Yesterday? I've been asleep that long?" "You needed it. Between the premature labor and everything else, your body demanded rest." A soft knock interrupted them. Eleanor entered carrying a small bouquet of winter flowers. Her face brightened at seeing Rebecca awake. "There you are," she said warmly. "You gave us quite a scare." "The documents," Rebecca remembered suddenly. "Are they safe?" Eleanor nodded. "Thomas took them directly to the museum's secure archive. Richard hasn't shown his face since you collapsed." A nurse appeared in the doorway. "Ms. Miller, someone would like to meet her mother." She wheeled in a clear bassinet containing a tiny bundle wrapped in a pink blanket. With gentle efficiency, the nurse helped position the infant in Rebecca's arms. The little girl was small but perfect, a dusting of dark hair, tiny fingers curled into fists, eyes still closed against the world's brightness. "Hello, little one," Rebecca whispered, overwhelmed by a love so fierce it stole her breath. "Welcome to our adventure." Martha wiped tears from behind her glasses. "What will you name her?" Rebecca looked down at her daughter, this miracle who had arrived amid revelations about the past and promises for the future. "Margaret," she said softly. "Margaret Eleanor Miller." Eleanor's hand flew to her mouth, eyes glistening. "Oh, Rebecca! It fits, don't you think? Name for two strong women who protected what matters." Later, when the baby had been returned to the NICU and Martha had gone for coffee, Thomas slipped quietly into the room. He approached Rebecca's bed with the reverence of someone entering sacred space. "I brought you something," he said, placing a small wooden box on her bedside table. "It belonged to Benjamin. I think he would want you to have it." Inside was a silver pocket watch, still ticking after all these years. Engraved on the back were the words, "Time reveals all truths." "Richard won't give up easily," Thomas warned gently. "But neither will we." Rebecca nodded, feeling stronger than she had in months. "My mother protected Benjamin's legacy for 30 years. I can do the same for my daughter." "You won't be alone," Thomas promised. "Some stories are meant to be shared." 6 months later. The ribbon cutting at the Oak Ridge Historical Society's new exhibit, The Silver Trail, Benjamin Harrison's Lost Settlement, drew a larger crowd than anyone had expected. Rebecca stood near the entrance, little Margaret nestled against her chest in a soft carrier, watching as visitors moved through displays of Spanish colonial artifacts, carefully preserved documents, and enlarged photographs of Benjamin Harrison at work. The centerpiece was a glass case containing the original map and coins, alongside Margaret Miller's journal and Benjamin's letters. A plaque beside them read, "Preserved by Margaret Miller and rediscovered by Rebecca Miller," proving that history's greatest treasures are the stories we safeguard for future generations. Eleanor, now the museum's director, approached with a champagne flute of sparkling cider. "Benjamin would be proud," she said, handing the glass to Rebecca. "And your mother, too." Rebecca smiled, adjusting the sleeping infant against her shoulder. "I still have so many questions about their relationship." Richard implied there was more to it than professional respect. "There often is more to any story than what's immediately visible," Eleanor replied wisely. "That's why we preserve history, so future generations can find their own truths in it." Martha joined them, her face flushed with excitement. Rebecca, the university called. They've approved your research grant. You can start work on your book about Benjamin's discoveries next semester, with full child care support. Thomas appeared at Rebecca's elbow, his silver hair neatly combed for the occasion. Over the past months, he had become a steady presence in their lives, a surrogate grandfather figure to little Margaret and a trusted friend to Rebecca. Someone left this for you, he said quietly, handing her a small envelope. Inside was a key, old-fashioned and heavy, attached to a tag that read simply, Harrison Cabin, Silver Creek Road, when you're ready for the final chapter. Rebecca looked around at the unlikely family she had found. Martha with her practical wisdom, Eleanor with her scholarly dedication, Thomas with his unwavering loyalty, and at the daughter who represented both her past and her future. The journey had begun with a desperate bid at a storage auction, but it had led to something far more valuable than treasure. Not yet, she said, tucking the key safely away. Some stories need time to unfold properly. As the evening light filtered through the museum's tall windows, painting golden rectangles across the historical displays, Rebecca felt a sense of peace that had eluded her for too long. Whatever secret still waited at the Harrison cabin would keep a while longer. For now, she had found what mattered most, a place in the continuing story, a legacy to preserve, and people to share it with. Little Margaret stirred against her shoulder, tiny fingers flexing in sleep. Rebecca pressed a gentle kiss to her daughter's head and whispered, "Our chapter is just beginning." Outside, twilight settled over Oak Ridge, stars emerging one by one above the ancient oaks. History, like the stars, had patience. It would wait for the right moment, the right person, to shine its light on truths long hidden. And Rebecca Miller, once alone in a drift, now stood firmly at the center of a story much larger than herself, ready to discover what came next. If this story touched your heart and reminded you of the treasures waiting to be discovered in your own family's past, please consider subscribing to our channel. Every week, we share stories where history's forgotten corners reveal unexpected gifts for those willing to look closely enough. Remember, the greatest legacies often come wrapped in the most ordinary packages.